have a question in the chat box from Kimi. Namasakan Ajahn. I have a question about neuter sterilized stray cats to help them end their suffering of giving birth and having kittens. Some get sick and die. Is this against Buddha teaching?
Poor cat. Well, you don't want to do things to animals that are going to lead them to get sick and die, deliberately, consciously. So, maybe generally speaking, you wouldn't do that. But I do know even Buddhist monasteries, sometimes they have a lot of stray dogs, stray cats, so they do get them neutered because otherwise they're just endlessly producing babies. But if it's to be done, do it in a humane way, a way that's not going to kill them. Do it with a trained vet in the proper way. If that's what you're going to do, you have compassion for the animal. You don't want to do something that's going to cause it to die. So if you're in doubt, well, don't do it. But if you have a way you can do it successfully without killing them, well, depends on the situation, doesn't it? Sometimes people are desperate. They have straight and they want to neuter them. Well, okay, maybe you take them to a doctor, a vet. It's your choice, your decision. But do it in a safe way. Don't hurt them and kill them.
Sadhu Lumpu, we have another question from Priyanta. When the mind seems to just blank and run out of metta, in such situation, is it more of kind actions that can generate metta rather than trying to recite with the eyes closed? Could Ajahn please comment on this?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Everybody runs out of metta except for non-returners and arahants. So that's almost everyone in this world will run out of metta from time to time. I always compare metta to the charge in a battery, and batteries run out of charge and then you've got to go and recharge them. So you have to learn skillful ways to recharge your metta when it's run out. Because you need metta for yourself as well as other people. It's very difficult to have metta for other people if you can't have metta for yourself. So when you notice you're getting very tired, worn out, burnt out, that's the time to recharge. So sometimes people say, oh, you've gone off on your retreat doing your own thing, you're not caring about other people. But if you see the long-term picture, maybe you go on retreat or you take yourself away, remove yourself from a situation to recharge so that you can go back and help other people and practice metta again. So you have to see the big picture as well. But we practice metta on every level, don't we? Body, speech and mind. So as you say, sometimes you practice metta by simply doing things for other people. Mentally you still feel pretty drained, but you can still maybe physically do something for somebody else. Our speech, you may feel, like say somebody's ill, and you think, oh, when you're ill, you're lying in a bed completely exhausted, in pain, you can't have metta, but you can, can't you? You can have a mental aspiration wishing others well, even if you're ill yourself. Maybe even you can say a few words to someone else, because when you're ill, lying on a bed, you may still be able to speak, and you can practice metta through your words, can't you? So you have to see metta is practiced on the level of body, speech and mind, and in every situation you adapt to how you are. So if you're completely burnt out, tired, exhausted, frazzled, frustrated, angry, well, okay, separate from others for a while, recharge, and then see whether you need to do things or say things, or even sometimes just sitting with your eyes closed, spreading thoughts of loving kindness is the appropriate thing. Say you're the one visiting someone else who's sick. Maybe they can't even speak because they're so ill, they're lying unconscious on a bed. You can still meditate next to them, sending thoughts of loving kindness. Or you know of somebody who's suffering in another place, you aren't able to talk to them or see them, be with them, but you can meditate for them and send your thoughts to them. So it's about learning the skill of practicing metta, and you practice on these different levels. So sometimes it is physically doing things for others, sometimes it's just mental aspirations and meditation, sometimes it's speech, and usually it's a combination of all three, isn't it? But know your limits, and when your metta is running low, go and recharge so that you can give out more metta later. And if you practice it, then it gets a bit easier. You know how to practice metta even when you are tired or ill or physically run down. You can practice metta easier. If you've done it before, you know what you have to do to bring up metta. So it's about regularly practicing it. We chant and practice spreading metta. We meditate and radiate metta. We do things for others. We practice dana, kindness, generosity, compassion in daily life. If you practice on all these levels, then it just gets easier and you know what you have to do in a situation. You don't have to think about it so much. That maybe is one of the goals you're aiming for, is to have metta ready at a moment's notice. You can cultivate metta in a situation, even if you're with someone who's very angry, and maybe they're directing their anger at you. The aim is to be able to bring up the metta at that time. You may not say or do anything, but you at least have it in your mind so that you don't get into an angry state yourself, or you don't do something that provokes them because they're already angry with you. It's about practice, isn't it? You keep doing it. So, when you see the experts on metta, usually it's monks and nuns who've practiced it a lot, but lay people can do it as well. When you see an expert, you see even when they're on their deathbed, they can have metta. They can have concern for other people. They're about to die, because I've seen this. Someone is about to die, but their mind is still full of metta, because it's just become natural for them to have thoughts of concern for other people. It's very beautiful to see, inspiring to see. And I know monks who are dying and they just ask, "Oh, did you get any food yet?" And then a few minutes later they're dead. The last thoughts are just concern, compassion, kindness for other people. Or, so many situations I could bring to mind, and it's a result of practice. You practice metta on the level of body, speech and mind until it becomes normal for you. But sometimes you need more metta for yourself when you're run down or ill. Other times you're stronger, so then you can give out a lot more metta to the world.
Sadhu Lumpo. The next question is from Nirosha. Dear Ajahn, how do we getting rid of avijja when we consciously abandoning tanha?
How do we get rid of
Ignorance.
ignorance? Yep. Well, what's the source of ignorance? The Buddha said, every time you give in to one of the 5 hindrances, the pancha nivarana, which we study a lot during our meditation, these 5 hindrances: sensual desire, ill will, sloth, torpor, dullness, restlessness and agitation and anxiety, and then skeptical doubt. These are 5 hindrances. Every time we give in to them, we are feeding more avijja, more ignorance. So it's a cycle. You give in to the 5 hindrances, or one of the 5 hindrances, that's feeding more ignorance, which feeds the hindrances again. So they keep coming up because we've given in to them before. We fed our ignorance in the past, so then they come up again. And if you don't practice the Dhamma, well, they'll just get stronger and more deeply ingrained into our consciousness. So avijja is ignorance. We say ignorance of the Four Noble Truths. If you summarize or reduce the Four Noble Truths down to one thing, you could reduce them down to mindfulness. It's a bit of a simplification, but it's helpful. So every time you have a moment of mindfulness, you're reducing ignorance in the conditioning cycles of the mind. You're able to let go of the five hindrances if they're arising. So ignorance is being undermined. It won't come up so often. It's not being reinforced. It's weakening. So then the five hindrances are weakening. So little by little by little, the more you practice mindfulness, the less ignorance you have, the less of the five hindrances you have to suffer from, the closer you're getting to letting go and ultimately towards Nibbana. This is why the Buddha could even put a timeline on it. You practice mindfulness perfectly, within 7 days, you'll be enlightened. If not 7 days, 7 weeks. If not 7 weeks, 7 months. Not 7 months, 7 years. If not 7 years, 7 lifetimes. So it's kind of inevitable. If you keep practicing, cultivating the Noble Eightfold Path, and particularly mindfulness, which supports all the other factors of the path, you will definitely reduce your ignorance. You will definitely reach Nibbana at the end of suffering. How long it takes, well, it depends on a few different factors, of course, but it will definitely happen. So this is the most optimistic thing you can hear today, is that you can definitely get beyond suffering if you keep cultivating mindfulness.
Sadhu Lumpo. The next question is from Leong. Bante, there is different Uposatha dates for Theravada and Mahayana calendar. Under the Theravada tradition, one does not eat after 12, but under the Mahayana tradition, one takes up vegetarianism. If I want to practice both days, do I practice according to the individual tradition?
It's confusing, isn't it? Whatever works for you. If you find the Mahayana teachings and practices useful and brings up faith, fine, follow them. If you find the Theravada tradition works for you, gives you confidence in the Buddha and his teachings, fine, then follow that. Or if you're doing a kind of modern fusion, because nowadays there's so much information there that you can pick and choose, so you can do your Theravada, Mahayana fusion practice. Well, if it works for you, fine. But the idea is you've got to get to the point where you realize the Four Noble Truths. You cultivate the path and realize these truths, end your suffering. And the Dalai Lama, who's one monk he's from the Vajrayana tradition, but we call that Mahayana as well. He came to Melbourne and he said, you've got to cultivate your practice till you've realized the Four Noble Truths. Theravada teachers come to Melbourne and say, you've got to practice and cultivate the practice until you've seen the Four Noble Truths. So in the end, getting you to the same place. One is called the big vehicle, one is the small vehicle. That's one way they talk about them. So if you like to travel in, what do they call it? The Airbus, what is it? 380 or whatever, the big one. Fine. If you want to travel in a tiny little passenger plane with 3 seats, okay, then that's what you're going in. Theravada is a little smaller. Fine. But the idea is you're going to the same place, the end of suffering. So whatever works. If you're following the Mahayana, their full moon day is 1 day after the Theravada, well, maybe you have double practice time. You have 2 full moon days that you keep the 8 precepts. I went to India with Ajahn and we went up Kichikuta mountain to pay respects at the Kandakuti, the kuti where the Buddha lived on Kichikuta mountain near Grajka in India, and there's the Theravada spot, and they have the little brick wall where the kuti is, and we went up there and we meditated and chanted, and everyone was very happy to be where the Buddha had lived and practiced. And there's the cave down below where Sariputta got enlightened, and we everyone was very happy following. That was the Theravada location for those places. And then everyone's looking across the valley, and there's this cable car up to the Mahayana site for the same thing. So we all thought, okay, let's go and have a look at the Mahayana site. So we went up to the Mahayana Kantakuti and we meditated and chanted there. Fine, whichever works for you, do it. The idea is to cultivate the path for the end of suffering and try not to make a problem out of it.
Sadhu Lumpo. Next question is from Fairly. Ajahn, my mother, 79 years old, verbally abuses my father, 84 years old, every day. Father is still working, earning money to feed mother and brother's family. They live together. And he never did anything nasty to mother, whereas mother still seemed to hate father. As the youngest child, I have no say in the family, but every time seeing father being abused, I feel very bad and sad. What can I do?
Well, I sympathize. It's not an uncommon kind of description of family life. You hear these kind of stories all the time. Sorry, there was just something coming up. Number one, well, have compassion for both your parents, because they're both your parents. Obviously, you express that differently. Your compassion for your father may be just to give him the support, because he sounds like he's having to endure a lot of abuse and he's still trying to help the family. So you show your appreciation and support to him. And then with your mum, anything you can do to soothe her, get her to be a little bit more aware of what she's doing, anything you can do, whether it's through your own discussions, communication with her, or any way you can get her to meet with Kalyana Mitta, who may be able to give her some good guidance and encourage her in the way of keeping sila, practicing mindfulness, being more restrained in her speech and behavior. Anything you can do. Maybe you have to be creative and see whether you can get your mum to hear the Dhamma somehow, playing tapes, YouTubes, whatever. But try not to make it worse by, like you say, you're the younger member of the family. You're not going to be able to teach your mother. It's unlikely you can teach her, but you can maybe get her to hear the Dhamma. If any way you can do that, that would be good. And just support anything in the family that helps to reduce the amount of abuse going on, anything that can help her to be more aware of what she's doing and produce a more tolerant atmosphere. So if you're practicing that yourself, you're practicing tolerance, compassion for both people, the better. Obviously, it's a strong karma that's come up. We get caught into patterns of behavior. So year after year, somebody can become abusive, and then they get stuck into that. So obviously, it's not good, but you want to try and help them in the best way you can. And if you don't feel you can help them, then try and get them to somebody who can. So maybe a teacher, get them to hear the teachings or meet teachers who can give them the right kind of guidance and instruction.
Sadhu Lumpo. The next question is from Sujata. Hello, Ajahn. Do one need to go to a Buddhist temple to be a Buddhist? There is no Buddhist temples where I live in France.
To start with, no, you don't. You can read all the Buddhist teachings online now. There's many websites in many different languages available. So that's a good starting point, is listen to the Dhamma and read the Dhamma online. So there's YouTube, just like this. teachings from all kinds of teachers on YouTube, and you can read the suttas and the texts and teachings from teachers. That's a good starting point, and then try and introduce the principles and the practices that the Buddha encouraged in your daily life. So, practice of generosity, morality, 5 precepts perhaps, and maybe begin a meditation practice based on what information and teachings you can get online. That's a good start. And then maybe occasionally, from time to time, you make the effort to go and seek out teachers. So, that may be only very rarely you get the chance to travel, even travel overseas to meet with teachers, go to a Buddhist monastery, to a teacher that maybe you've read or heard online, and then you want to follow up by actually meeting them so that you can have some rapport and get some direct teachings and guidance. That may only be very occasionally. Well, you just do the best you can in your situation. But in France, I know there are many different Buddhist temples, Mahayana temples, Theravada temples, and like other countries, there's new places arising all the time. So maybe there's something nearer to you than you realize. You might have to, again, go online and search where are these teachers and temples and places of practice, and you may be able to find somewhere nearer to home that you occasionally can go to. So you just do the best you can with the situation you're in, but try to introduce the Buddhist practices into your daily life. Buddhism it's a method for practicing for the end of suffering. So that's what you're aiming for, to introduce these practices. But having Kalyana Mitta, other fellow practitioners, does help. So see what efforts you can make to find them.